Welcome everybody to the 6th Merge community call. We're very happy to have you here. We're going to go over general updates about where the merge is at, any announcements related to mainnet timing if you haven't seen them, and there will be time for questions as always. And yeah, we can get started. I'm just going to do a quick survey through the members just to see what client devs or researchers are here.
Oh,
Tim, do you want to kick it off with?
Yeah, someone in the chat says they can't
greatest?
hear. Sorry, yeah, someone in the chat says they can't hear, but can somebody else confirm that they? Okay, Remy already confirmed that the sound is good. Can somebody else confirm that they hear? Just in the chat. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, sweet. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead and I'll just try to grab links for whatever you're talking about, or if you have them handy and we can throw them in the chat.
Sure. I guess the first thing we can cover is basically the last testnet updates and mainnet and yeah, like how we get there. So as people may have noticed, Gordy, which is the most used testnet both for applications and stakers, moved to proof of stake earlier this week. Good question by Trent. Was there a Gordy retro? Yes, Perry had a doc looking at the various issues we hit. The main one was that one of the client teams who ran a lot of validators had an issue updating their nodes. And that's been fixed since then. There were a couple issues with some of the client implementations, but they did end up kind of reorging back and kind of being on the main chain. So given all of this, client team still felt comfortable moving ahead with setting a date for mainnet. And so yesterday on the consensus layer call, we did that. We've now got an epoch for the Bellatrix part of the upgrade. Let me see if I can pull up the number real quick. The epoch is scheduled for September 6th. I don't have the exact number. Maybe someone can find it and put it in the chat. So September 6th is when we expect Bellatrix to hit on the Ethereum mainnet. Oh, actually, yeah, Danny just posted his link in the chat. He put out a blog post today with all this info. So if you run a node, a validator, or else other type of node, you want to upgrade before September 6th, both your EL and your CL client. We expect to have a blog post with all of the proposed versions for these clients out around August 23rd. We do want to reconfirm that the TTD is right next week on the Alcor Devs call, but there's very high chances that it's not gonna change. But this is kind of the cause for like the lag there. So next Thursday, we confirmed the TTD on Alcor Devs. A couple days after that, client teams put out a release on the 23rd. Expect a blog post. There'll be something on the EF blog, but you can expect an announcement across the various client teams, communication channels and whatnot. So you can download the release then. You want to have upgraded before September 6th at 11:34 a.m. UTC. At that point, the beacon chain will upgrade to Bellatrix, which just gets it like ready for the merge. And then we've set a TTD. The TTD value starts by 5875 and is all zeros towards the end. We expect this to hit around September 15th. TTD is a function of the difficulty on the network, which is a function of how much hash rate there is. So if there's a kind of increase in hash rate, then we would hit it before September 15th. If there's a decrease, we would hit it after. So this is why it's kind of hard to get an exact date. And then Trent shared in the chat a TTD tracker, which updates kind of based on the latest hash rates. And then the last thing I'll say, or I pause here, is between like the original announcement, like which we expect on August 23rd, and TTD, it's expected that client teams will put out other upgrades of their release. So, with either stabilization improvements or just new features or stuff like that. So you probably want to keep an eye out and follow whatever client you're using in those couple of weeks, because they might put out another release before TTD is actually hit, given there might be basically almost a month between the time when we actually announce it and the time when it hits. And then the last thing I will say, the actual last thing I will say is because TTD is very hard to estimate because it's a function of hash rate. We're in kind of the last innings of proof of work on Ethereum. If we saw that the hash rate would like drop dramatically and that instead of hitting TTD around September 15th, hash rate drops a ton, and now we think it's going to be like October 15th and kind of getting later and later, we could coordinate a TTD override. We did this on the Robston network already. Ideally, we don't, just because it kind of forces people to either upgrade their nodes again or run a special command to do this. But if we see that Bellatrix is activated and TTD is not getting any closer because hash rate is dropping, then we might make the call to do a TTD override. And so again, just please pay attention to either like blog.ethereum or your clients like communication channels. And this is where this stuff would be announced. But in short, yeah, Danny's article has like a pretty concise summary of all of this. Yeah.
Great job, Tim.
Yeah, I think
you've
that's
covered
like
everything.
all the updates. Yeah, I think we could probably do just like questions for the rest, because that seems like,
Yeah. So I mean, like,
we have
if people didn't pick up on this, generally the summary of Tim's summary is, if you haven't been paying attention before, now is the time. The merge has been, the merge TTD has been chosen, and this is likely what the number will be. It's not saying it won't change, but this is the time where if you're validating on the Beacon chain, you want to be tuned in, you want to be aware of what's happening, and making sure that you're running the right software ahead of the actual merge event. So for the next month or so, don't disappear for a month. Make sure that you're following the client teams whose software that you're running. We'd hate for somebody to miss it when the actual time comes. All right, yeah, and there are some client devs and researchers here who probably can answer questions. So if anybody does have questions, generally.
What were the problems encountered when merging testnet? I think Perry is here. Perry, do you want to like walk through the doc that we shared a bit more and kind of talk about like the implications?
Yeah, and generally, just I'll unmute you or find you first. But generally, like, what the sort of class of issues that we hit over all of the test nets, and generally what that means for mainnet. I think I unmuted you, Perry. Let me know if that didn't work.
Yeah, hey, I think this should work now. I do have another doc that might help with that. Hang on, let me just find that. That just kind of goes through the class of issues that one might face during the merge. Yeah, it's here. So yeah, so we had the Gurley testnet merge yesterday, and a decent bunch of the issues were just attributed to a client team not setting up the JWT authentication. So the merge is introducing this concept of an execution layer and a consensus layer. So if you guys are used to running Ethereum nodes, what you've been running so far is now called the execution layer or ETH1 node. And you would have to add a consensus layer node. That's the Beacon chain node. And in order for these two nodes to communicate with each other, we've introduced a new port. That's the Engine API port. And by default, that's port 8551. And that's an authenticated port. So you have to configure the same JWT secret on both sides. There's a bunch of guides online to guide you through how to set up these nodes, as well as what the secrets mean. And they're extremely good. I think we even have a couple linked. I'll try and find the link for the link. But that being said, the client team had forgot to configure the JWT token. And once they did that, the nodes came back online. The other issues were due to multiple terminal blocks. And that essentially means the merge had two candidates and the nodes took some time to decide which of these candidates they're backing. And we had some fail-safes built in and the fail-safe kicked in. And once they kicked in, essentially the chain was okay again. But those were like the two big classes of problems. Yeah, and besides that, I'd highly recommend that everyone on the call look through the checklist for the merge. It's again not an exhaustive document, but it covers most of the pitfalls we've seen over the last couple of merges. Especially have a look at the common pitfalls. Like almost every big issue we've noticed has been because there was the wrong flag used, or the port wasn't configured, or the secret wasn't right, or people just forgot to run one of the two pieces of software needed. So yeah, just please have a look at those. And in general, the logs will tell you 9 out of 10 times that something's wrong. Yeah, and I'm happy to answer some questions if someone has something.
I guess, yeah, if there's more questions on that, we can answer them in the, or I guess you can ask them in the chat and we can answer them as a follow-up. And just worth noting, Perry posted his checklist there, and then there's a like similar document on the Launchpad as well that I posted. So if you're on a validator, yeah, just running through those.
I think we should probably compile all of these links into a single spot, just so it's easy.
Yes.
But go ahead.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, with the notes of this.
Thanks, Pooja.
Okay, Oleg has a question about TTD sabotage. So there's two ways you can affect TTD with proof of work. One is you stop mining and then TTD takes forever to be reached. And the only impact that this has is it makes the merge happen at a later date than it otherwise would. And so if this were to happen, and you can think there's many reasons for people to stop mining now, right? It doesn't have to be sabotage. It's, you know, people might choose to sell their GPUs because they feel like the return on like the rest of the mining life on Ethereum is not worth it. So it's not necessarily like malice that triggers this, but if people stop mining, TTD happens later than it otherwise would. What we need to do is basically select a TTD value that is lower than the current one, which we would then hit quicker, kind of based on the new hash rates. So every single client has a flag or like a configuration option that allows for this. And clients can also put out new releases overriding this. We've tested this procedure on Robston before. And so I'll link you to a blog post that kind of shows you what it looks like and kind of links every single client's command to upgrade, to update this value. The other way that proof of work and TTD can kind of get tricky is if there is so much mining power on the network that TTD ends up happening before the Bellatrix upgrade is activated. And this was actually the case on Robston. On Robston, we didn't have the case where there was not enough mining power. We had the case where there was too much. The reason for that is that mining on testnets is basically not a profitable thing. So the hash rate is quite low. And so it's quite easy to raise it significantly. So when we chose the TTD yesterday, we basically chose a value which, if you wanted to make it happen before Bellatrix, I believe you would need the hash rate to have already spiked back to the all-time highest we've seen on the Ethereum network, and to keep mining at that rate until we hit TTD. And then the closer we get to Bellatrix, like with every day that passes, you need to then not be at all-time high, but you need to have an even greater share of hash rate than that. And because this is something we see on the network, if something like that were to happen, you know, we wake up tomorrow, there's like a massive supply of hash rate, then we could do an override, which pushes the TTD back to a higher value. And then as soon as Bellatrix has happened, which is scheduled for September 6th, then it really doesn't matter when the TTD is hit. It becomes purely a sort of coordination exercise about making sure everybody has the same TTD set, but there's no kind of impact or attack on the merge based on that. So basically, we think that choosing a value where we have some pretty solid bounds in terms of how much the hash rate would have to increase to disrupt things, and then having code and kind of a release procedure that's well tested, such that if this thing happened, we could counter it. And so far, it's not looking like the hash rate is rising. Basically, the all-time high was something like 1100 petra hash. I'm not sure what the unit is, but 11 gigahashes, or sorry, no. Anyways, the 1100 something, and then we're at about 900 now. So we've dropped since the all-time high by a fair amount. It hasn't risen since we've chosen the TTD. We'll keep monitoring it, but then a week or two from now, you would have to have hash rate that goes past what the previous all-time high hash rate was, and I think that becomes quite unrealistic. And then maybe there's a follow-up question about what's the backup plan in the case the merge fails or some series of issues happen. So there's no way in which we can go back to proof of work once we activate the merge sequence. And the reason for that, first, the code does not allow it, but the kind of design reason is once you move from proof of work to proof of stake, and even once you signal that move, you can't assume that if it doesn't work out on the other side, you can come back and the hash rate will still be there waiting for you and mining, right? The assumption from a design standpoint is just once we activate this, we assume that there is no longer security on the proof of work side that could backstop us, and we need to ensure that things work out on proof of stake. And obviously, this is why we do so many testnets, so many shadow forks. If there was an issue that happened on a merge, which we did, which we hadn't encountered so far, the solution would be fixing it on proof of stake on mainnet as soon as possible, not going back to proof of stake. Effectiveness, Remy, I see you're posting about this in the chat. Do you want to take that question?
I will try to unmute him. Can't find the account. Oh, maybe it's because I'm special character or something. Yeah. 1 second.
Hey.
Hey.
So effectiveness is known to be wildly changing on testnets, right? So I believe you were Lucian, you were mentioning that your effectiveness went down after the merge, and I'm guessing this is on Girly. So it's common to see effectiveness changes on testnet because there's less resources being spent there. People don't have any real value or real money there. So it's not uncommon to see effectiveness goes down. But I posted the resources on effectiveness. If you want to check it out in the chat, it's a post by a testant. It'll enlighten you on how it's computed. I'm not sure exactly how it's computed on Beacon Chain, the website. I can't remember how it is, but I believe it's with your attestation, if you're always correct in terms of the votes that you do on source, target, and head. But on, like I mentioned, on testnet, it widely changes because people are not putting the same resources. But on mainnet, it should be quite stable. I don't know how it'll look after the merge on mainnet, but I assume it'll eventually be quite stable.
Thank you. Hopefully that answered the question from the chat. let me scroll up and try to find the next question. Caleb asks, are there plans to allow for a single CL, multiple EL configuration without a mixer? Oh,
A multiplexer in the
multiplexer.
future. So today it's, oh, Danny, you have the audio to take it? Let's see. Can we?
Right there, two Dannys.
Lowercase Danny is EF Danny.
No,
Kinda.
well, we can, but your audio is.
Well, am I robot?
Yeah, you're pulling a VB here.
Because the API is unlikely to support that directly. Client teams may add support, but I think a muxer, some sort of multiplexer sitting in the middle is a better generic solution. As I think CL client supported it. You know, if anyone does, it'd probably be varied.
Okay. So short answer, not without a multiplexer. For now, at least. Next one, will disk usage increase faster after the merge, or can I assume the same size increase before the merge, summing up the usage of CL and EL client? I know there was a thing here about like the blocks being stored on both layers, and Prism, I know, had like looked into this. I don't know, Terrence, can you give us the latest on the CL side, like whether the storage increases because you now store the execution payload as well?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Property.
so most clients have this feature. It's just not only in Prism. So I will highly recommend you guys to read the client documentation. So the feature is basically, instead of storing the full payload, you store the header. And then because there's no point in storing like payloads in two different locations, and that's CL and EL, because EL is storing the payload already. So then the CL could just store like the blinded version, which is just a transaction root. And if you need to retrieve the payload, you can just get it from the EL. So I will highly recommend you guys to read the documentation. I think for Prism, it's gated behind the flag. It's not enabled by default. And then, so the compromise of not using this feature is that I think this size will increase by what, like 200 gigabyte per year. So if you're willing to take the hit, that's also fine as well. So there's, yeah, so it's just a nice option here.
Okay, so yeah, short answer, I guess, is by default, it would increase a bit because the execution payloads get stored on both sides, but CL teams are working on or already have features to mitigate that to a large extent.
Yeah, exactly.
Sweet, thank you. Any other questions? Nethermind plus Lighthouse after the merge started to reorg. Yes, this is on Gordy. I expect we did see that. I don't know if there's anyone from Nethermind on the call here. If not, I don't see anyone from Nethermind. If there is, please let yourself known in the chat and we'll unmute you. If not, there was definitely an issue that was found with Nethermind during the Gordy merge. It is mentioned as part of like the doc that Perry shared earlier. Yeah, I don't know that there's anyone on it who can have more details. Oh, yeah, exactly. So in this doc, there are some issues there. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. This is literally what, yeah, okay. Yeah, this is probably the issue from the doc where you have to restart and then it's back to normal. So the Nethermind team is aware and they're working on this right now. Yeah, and there's like a Hive test that's also going to be added to hit exactly this edge case, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, they already have a fix, Perry says. Sweet. Any other questions? If not, I have a question for each staker folks. will there be another validator prep workshop before the mainnet merge? And if so, where can people find this information?
Yes, so there'll be another workshop in about 30 minutes. So if you want to learn more about the details of that workshop, let me try to find the link here. I'll post the link in the chat. So in about 30 minutes, we'll have another workshop, and people will be able to join us. I believe we will have Summary Sat giving us some updates about his guide for the merge, and we'll do a bunch of different stuff in order to prepare for the merge, and we'll answer everyone's question there. So if you have any technical questions with your own setup, please join us and we will be happy to help you.
Amazing. And is there a plan to have another one before mainnet, or is this the last one? Obviously they're all recorded, but yeah, just curious.
Yeah, I believe we have a plan to have another workshop maybe next week or in 2 weeks. We'll
Awesome.
see. Yep.
Okay, and yeah, Pooja link that in the comments there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I'm not seeing any other questions, which is, I guess I didn't expect that, given this is like even closer to the merge, but maybe everything's been answered. Oh, here we go.
Oh.
There's another one.
Yeah, good MEV-Boost question. Is there anyone from Flashbots on the call? Or who's like worked on with MEV-Boost?
I think Terrence has done some of the Prism work for it.
Oh, yeah. There you go. Oh, Terrence, you should be unmuted.
Maybe he gave the mic back to Danny.
Okay. Let's wait for Terrence.
Yeah, so we unmuted you, Terrence, but maybe there's something on your end.
Hello, test.
There you go.
Yes, it works.
Okay, awesome. Sorry about that. So with MEV-Boost, it's a little trickier because like every client does this differently. So there's like, it's kind of hard to come to like this like cohesive like point, like how does it work and like how do you know when it's working, right? I think for us, it's like we utilize the health endpoint of the MEV-Boost pretty heavily. So when something doesn't work, you will see from the error log right away. So at startup, we call MEV-Boost to like check the health. If it doesn't work, and then you will log the error. And then before the block proposing, we also check the health status, right? But at the worst case, we also build a block in the background in parallel with the local EE as well. So it's so like in the event that the MEV-Boost doesn't work or the relay is done, you will not be missing block because you can still broadcast your personal block that's from the local EE. So I would say just pay heavily attention to the log and just grab any error that you can find, and that is related to MEV-Boost.
Thank you, Terrence. AKS, can you put your question in the chat first before we unmute you? Okay, doesn't seem like we have any more questions coming in. Tim, were there any topics or researchers, client devs? Is there anything you want to say specifically to this audience of 80 wonderful people that we have here?
I'm actually curious. So, like Bowery, hopefully I got your name right. Why do you think the gap should be bigger than 7 to 10 days, given that as a solo node operator, you sort of have to be ready when Bellatrix hits anyway. So once Bellatrix hits, everything should be configured. So I'm curious, what's the thing you would like to have a wider gap for? What's the main reasoning? And we can either unmute you or if you want to answer in the chat, but yeah, I'm just curious to understand better what's like the constraint there. And then while I think I've asked you to unmute if you can, but yeah, while we're waiting for that, Micah asks us to reiterate the TTD isn't final, so it's tentative. So basically, if we should confirm it on All Core Devs next week. But then even then, if we see some like crazy variations in the hash rate or whatnot, we might change it once more. So yeah, please keep an eye out. But yeah. Okay, and then AKS has a question about miners turning off their nodes much before the TTD target. So this is basically what we discussed earlier. So what would the first impact of this would be? It would make TTD hit much later. So that would kind of slow down the merge. There is a point at which, you know, a significant enough part of hash rate leaving makes Ethereum kind of not as secure by however much hash rate we've lost. And so I think those are all cases like both in where we just consider making TTD lower and kind of pulling the merge forward based on the new hash rate levels. There is, if we saw like that the hash rate was going so low and you know, being completely unstable or being attacked, there's another like override method that we can use where we actually hard code basically a specific proof of work block and agree on it as the final proof of work block. This is really not ideal. So the you know, doing that would kind of incur liveness failure on Ethereum. So we don't want to get there. So, you know, if the hash rate goes lower, the main solution is just to reduce the TTD and find a closer target.
Right, but yeah, as Micah mentioned in the chat, the TTD isn't final. So if for some reason there is a need to do an override, just make sure that you're following Tim or the Ethereum blog as a place to get information about what the latest is over the next month.
And okay, there's a follow-up question about like if the TTD if the difficulty goes down so much, can the Ethereum Foundation fill in the gaps for miners? And the short answer is no. Like the amount of hash rate on Ethereum is massive. Even if the EF and all client teams wanted to, like, you know, we don't have like this hardware. So it's really the best tool that like protocol developers have is just changing the TTD value rather than trying to affect the actual hash rate on the network. On testnets, we were able to do that because on testnets, we basically, you know, for like a couple $100 or maybe a couple $1,000 could like double the entire hash rate on a testnet. This is like on the order of millions, tens of millions of dollars. So changing the TTD is much better. Oh, good question by Bub. What happened is there's multiple miners that find a block passing TTD at the same time. So the way that the merge is designed, any block which passes TTD, which is obviously a valid Ethereum block, and who is the first block in its fork tree to pass TTD is a valid candidate terminal block. So it's very much possible that, you know, there's two of them or three of them, like we see uncles on the Ethereum network right now. So as long as they meet all those criteria, basically the validator who produces the block after is free to choose any one of them, and then it might reorg until this block is finalized. And like Justin is saying in the chat, this is sort of what happened in Gordy, because basically, like, yeah, until we've like finalized any any proof of work block which exceeds TTD, whose parent does not exceed TTD and otherwise follows all the protocol rules, is a valid terminal block. And so it's possible for a validator to select any one of them, and it's possible for the next validator to select another one. And this is why we want to wait for the network to have finalized before we consider the merge to be complete. Yeah. And ideally, the network will converge quite quickly on one of them, but we obviously want to finalize just to be sure. Yeah. Okay, stablecoins migrations. So short answer is at the application level, nothing changes, nothing is required for applications to migrate to the merge. So if you have USDT now, you'll have USDT after the merge, and you don't need to move them or do anything with that. So there's no applications where you should have to do an action. In the case where there was a separate fork around the merge at the same time, so like a proof of work fork in parallel, then everything on Ethereum kind of gets mirrored on both sides. So if you have, say, a USDT balance, in theory, you have a USDT balance on both chains. But then because, say, USDT is backed by actual dollars not on Ethereum, the tether, the issuer will have to recognize this is the chain where these USDTs are actually redeemable for $1. I believe so far Tether and Circle have both recognized that this would be on their proof of stake chain. But yes, and like Micah is saying, this is the case every time there's a network upgrade. There's the there's the opportunity for people on the network to not follow this upgrade, and then what happens is everything gets duplicated across both chains, but anything that has a reference to something off chain only kind of gets honored or recognized on one of those two chains. And for USDT specifically, and I believe pretty much every stable coin, this is the proof of stake chain. And Caleb has an important clarification. You shouldn't have to give out your private key, sign any messages, migrate your coins. Please be on the lookout for that. We've seen some really good phishing emails and just fake emails about this recently. So if somebody says you need to move your coin, or you need to sign in somewhere to activate the merge or anything like that, it's very, very likely a scam. So please be on the lookout. Okay, so Damien has a question about basically the TTD estimate being from the hash rate at the current level with September 15th. That's correct. And so this is why we tell people to that it is variable. So, our goal wasn't to reach it exactly on the 15th. Our goal is mostly to reach it after Bellatrix happens, and ideally not too far after the 15th. So you can think of we want to be safe plus or minus a week on each side. And this is roughly why the 15th was targeted, because if you have Bellatrix on the 6th, you would have to have a massive increase in hash rate for it to happen before. And if we get, to the 6th and close to the 15th and we see we're still very far out, then we would just do a TTD override based on the hash rate levels there, or the hash rate trends. Yeah, but the goal isn't to absolutely try and get it on the 15th. It's first and foremost to make sure it happens after Bellatrix, and then ideally get it in one go, roughly close to the 15th. But if that's not going to happen, we can always do an override. Any other questions? I don't know where the pandas came from. Maybe someone knows.
Xiaowei made a meme a couple months ago. I'll find it. But the verbal description is the execution and consensus layers are represented by a white bear and a black bear, and the merge is then coming together. That's where the panda comes from. And people liked it so much it ended up in all the client software. Thanks, Barry. Yeah, that's the tweet. Yes, I said white bear. It's technically a polar bear. TLDR. There was a summary of Gurley. Francis, there was a summary of Gurley earlier. There's a doc if somebody can share that again if you're joining late. I'm not sure what you mean by resource constraints. You mean in times of non-finality?
I think it's that some of the Besu nodes were running on a resource constrained machine, and that caused them to go offline. I don't know, Justin, is that correct? I'm gonna try and unmute you. Yep.
Hey, say again?
Was it Besu that had some issues during the Gordy merge, just because some of the nodes were running on like resource, like instances with too small resources?
Not this time. That was a problem in prior shadow forks.
Okay.
But we were well resourced for Gurley.
Okay, I don't know. Maybe Perry, do you know?
I also have to check. I'm not sure which client it is anymore.
But yeah, short answer is I think this happened on Gordy as well, but then the situation is just you give them more resources and the clients were fine.
Also, resource use tends to spike quite a bit during non-finality. And at least on Gurley, that period was just a couple of epochs after the merge. And once we hit finality again, resource use does decrease quite a bit. So we even with the previous nodes, I think I don't even think they had to upgrade, but I think it sort of fixed itself once finality had been reached.
Any other questions? Now's the time to get them in if you were waiting until a quiet moment. And one last offer for any client devs or researchers who are on the call and you want to mention something that wasn't touched on before, feel free to raise your hand. If you'd like to talk about your client, anything specific that people should be aware of, any resources that you can offer to people, things like that. Okay, I'm gonna take, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if not, because there's like been a couple questions about like estimating the TTD and whatnot, and maybe I'll just like add a last amount of nuance on there. The reason, you could imagine a world where we just have Bellatrix happen and then we decide the TTD, right? And this is what we did on a couple of the testnets. The challenge with doing that is just that like you have to get people to upgrade their nodes twice. And because this is already like a pretty complicated upgrade relative to other ones, we opted to like optimistically have people only need their nodes to be updated once and to kind of bake in a TTD estimate for that. Usually when we ask people to upgrade their nodes, we think like on the order of about 2 weeks is like reasonable. So like we put out the software, put out an announcement, and within 2 weeks, usually we can get the community to upgrade their nodes. So if we kind of hit Bellatrix and we see it's going to be way more than 2 weeks to hit TTD, then it probably makes sense to coordinate another TTD and have it lower and have people upgrade their nodes again. But this is like why there's so much like uncertainty or like, wide estimates around it. It's just because we need to predict. Oh, sorry, my headphones went off for a second. But yeah, it's just we need to predict this value that's really far out in the future that has like a lot of like unknowns that go into it. But if we, and so we take kind of our best guess for it. If we see that this best guess is wildly off, then we can correct it. And the only downside is people need to re-upgrade their nodes or run an additional command. And this is what we'd like to avoid in like the happy case, but it's not, it's definitely not the end of the world to have to do it. And we've done it on Robston. And for users, it's basically either downloading one new version of their clients or running one extra command on it while it's, while it's going live. And then there's a question about issuance. So issuance is basically based on the total amount of validators on the network. So if there's more validators, the total issuance goes up, but then the kind of rewards to the validators proportional to their stakes go down. And that kind of targets a specific amount of validator. So it's confirmed that it is part of the spec, but it's not confirmed in that we don't know how many new validators might want to validate after the merge, and that impacts issuance. And I think ultrasound.money, I believe, has like a nice little like graph that you can tweak to see, based on how many validators and whatnot.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I didn't realize they had a adjustable graph. This is great. All right. Looks like we're actually out of questions now, aside from some TTD Panda ideas, but I don't know if we're gonna be able to include that. Micah is sad for some reason. He would love to keep answering questions. But I think we can probably wrap up here. I've done a last call like 3 or 4 times now. Tim, anything else?
No. Yeah. Thanks everyone for showing up. Do you want to give the date for the next one? Because we've scheduled one more of these before the merge, if I'm remembering correctly.
I think we were going to plan for, let's see, Wednesday the 7th of September. Does that sound right?
Actually, yeah. Yes. So when we said we wanted to do after Bellatrix and before mainnet, right? So that there will be more ETH-Staker events before Bellatrix. We can encourage people to watch those. But then between Bellatrix and mainnet, we will do another one of these. So
maybe that's the 9th then.
Yeah, tentatively say September 9th at this time. So like 4 weeks from now exactly.
Okay, yeah. That will be if you're interested in attending that, it'll be in the same spot as a PR in the Ethereum PM repo with an agenda. And in 10 minutes, if you're a validator, remember that there's an ETH-Staker call workshop happening in 10 minutes. And Remy, where's the best place for people to jump into that? Maybe you can share the link again or direct them a certain place. If you already left, just, I don't know where I would point you, but the ETH-Staker Discord probably is the best place.
Somebody just posted the YouTube link again.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So ETH-Staker YouTube channel.
Go ahead.
No, that's it. The YouTube link there by BTH is the ETH-Staker workshop.
One last question. I don't know if we can explain replay attacks, but I'm not going to get into like how to financially profit from this upgrade. Replay attack is when you send a transaction on one chain and it can be replayed on a chain that's similar, but not exactly the same as the one that you sent the original transaction. So aside from that, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think we got it. Thanks everyone for showing up, and yeah, see you in about a month for the next one of these.
All right. Thank you again to the client devs and researchers who showed up and answered questions. I really appreciate you spending time on this. So yeah, we'll see everybody in a month or in the R&D Discord or elsewhere. Bye.